My name is Adele Raemer, originally from New York, but I've lived on kibbutz Nirim for the past 48 years. I came there when I was minus 10.
Could you please tell us, how did you get to Nirim from New York? What brought you to Nirim?
I was in a Zionist youth movement as a teenager, young Judea. And I went to the camps, and then after high school I went on a gap year to Young Judea year course. 1972-73, I fell in love with the country, but went back to the States to go to college, like all good Jewish girls do. But then in October 73, the Yom Kippur War broke out, and I said, well, what am I doing in the States? Israel needs me, and I made Aliyah in December 73. I made Aliyah to Kibbutz Keturah, which was founded by members from my movement, and I was drafted I was told within a year to be at the draft center. I went into the army, and when I was doing my army service, I realized that Keturah wasn't really the place I wanted to spend my life. But I had to go someplace. It was part of my army service. I had to go someplace that the army would approve of, and that's how I got to Nirim, 1975.
Did you immediately fall in love with the place, or did it take time?
No, I immediately fell in love with the place. The people were wonderful and accepting, and made me feel significant, made me feel important. The person who was in charge of the work roster put me to work in a children's house. He said, "You saved us. I don't know what we would have done if you hadn't come." They just welcomed me very warmly. And I fell in love with Ben Meshek, somebody who was born there as well. We got married, had 2 children, got divorced, got married again, had another child, and inherited my husband's child from his first marriage. And they were all raised on Nirim.
And are you still working with children in Nirim?
So I am #retired. But I was an English teacher for all of my professional life. I was also an English teacher trainer and a trainer for digital pedagogy. And this is my first year of being retired. And so I'm doing this, which is sort of my very strange hobby. Talking about my region. And I've been doing that since about 2011. So it's a weird hobby, but it has come in very useful especially during this period.
Let's go back to October. Before we get to October 7th, could you tell us, please, how was it the week before it was Sukkot? How did you spend the Sukkot in the kibbutz this year?
So we have sukkahs. Not every family, anybody who wants to, has a sukkah. I'm an amateur photographer, and in Kibbutz Nir Oz, just next door to us, there's a beautiful pomegranate orchard, and I was obsessed taking pictures there. So during the week of Sukkot, I took a picture. I made my daughter I have a daughter with 3 girls who live on the kibbutz, and I made her dress them up in red and take them to the pomegranate orchard, and I took pictures of them there, which came out very beautiful. Of course, afterwards, after October 7th, she was so angry at me. She said, "I can't believe you took us to that place to take pictures." It was so close to the border, but that's how secure I felt at that time before October 7th. October 6th, I had such a sense of safety and security that October 6th was the kibbutz birthday anniversary. And it was a wonderful celebration. And my youngest son, who doesn't live on the kibbutz, anymore, but came to visit for the celebration and for his birthday, which was on October 8th. And my daughter was in charge of the festivities. So first of all, before I went to bed, I told my son, if you don't see me in the morning, don't worry. I'm going to get up early to drive to the fields to take pictures of the wildflowers at sunrise.
That was the plan.
Thanks God I was too tired or lazy or whatever. For whatever reason, I did not go out, because I wouldn't be sitting here with you today if I had, because I know that terrorists were in the very spot that I had planned on going to take pictures. So October 6th was this big party, and my daughter and her husband are separated. So she was in charge of the party, and my 3 granddaughters, aged 2, 6, and 8, slept at my son-in-law's house.
And who was with you at home?
At home, my son Adam was with me at home.
When did you wake up and how?
6:30 in the morning. My son was sleeping in the safe room, which is my guest room, and I was sleeping in my bedroom. And I was already up at 6 because I was supposed to go take pictures, but I just sort of stayed in bed and chilled. And then at 6:30 the alarm started, and I ran into the safe room. It was such a heavy barrage that I was scared to stand up and close the middle window, the middle sleeve on the window.
Weren't you used to that? That was something different?
It was relentless. It was relentless. It was just such a heavy barrage, and that the metal sleeve on the window is meant to protect us from shrapnel. So we just sat on the floor and waited for it to let up. And as I was on the floor, I was doing a Facebook Live from the safe room of the TV. And if you look back and I have a Facebook group that I founded in 2011, Life on the Border with Gaza. If you go back to October 7th, you'll see it. You see the TV. I'm shooting from the floor to the TV, and you see some children's program, Yuval Mevulbal or something like that, and all the pop-ups showing all the places that the rockets are headed. So we waited a few minutes for it to ease up, for me to be able to stand up and close the sleeve. And then after a few minutes, I got a WhatsApp message in my teachers group. I'm #retired, but I'm still in the WhatsApp group. And people were saying, wow, this is such a heavy barrage and it's all over. And so why did my friend Judy sent a picture of the sky, which told me that she was on her sunrise walk with her husband. She's from Nirim, and every morning they would go on a sunrise walk. So the day went on and I didn't think much about it. About an hour later, I tried to call her. And I couldn't message her. There was no response. Even the little checks were. And I asked in the group, has anybody spoken to Judy? And nobody had spoken to her. And somebody said, call her husband. And I tried to call her husband. Nothing. So we're sitting in the safe room. And suddenly we start hearing gunshots. So we often hear the explosions of mortars and rockets, and we know what that is, but gunshots. And I might not be getting the timeline right. I don't remember if it was before we started hearing it or afterwards. We got a message on the WhatsApp saying, Israel has been infiltrated. Go lock your doors and windows. So it was then that I realized that the heavy rocket barrage was to camouflage the main event that was going on along the border, which at the time, tens of places were penetrated by thousands of terrorists. So again, I did a Facebook Live and I said, we're supposed to go lock the doors and the windows. I'm sure they're not going to get this far, but I will humor them. I swear, you go back and you see me saying that. It's like, so I closed the doors and the windows. I have a glass door out in the back that a 90-year-old grandmother could kick down. Not very useful, but but I did it anyway. I did what I could, closed it. We went back into the safe room, but you can't lock the door to the safe room. The door to the safe room has a handle that when you're pulling it down, it's locked. The safe room was built to protect us, to keep us safe against rockets, not against infiltration. So we realized that in order to keep us safe, really, if our house happens to be infiltrated, you just have to pull down on the handle. And we're saying, where's the army? Where are the police? Where are the people that are supposed to be coming to save us? Crickets. Crickets. At one point, we got a message saying, each family has to take care of themselves, which, especially on kibbutz, is the most terrifying situation.
What do you mean, especially in the kibbutz?
Well, kibbutz, there's always somebody that's going to come help you. And so there were 4 first responders, Kitat Konanut, that were there and active that day. My son-in-law is one of the first responders. However, he couldn't leave his house because he was with my grandchildren. So at one point, my son, who understands a little bit Arabic, we heard speaking in Arabic outside our house. And all of a sudden he heard somebody saying, come away from there, or come here, or something like this. And we didn't understand what that was, but we waited and we looked at each other and told each other that we love each other and basically said goodbye. I mean, I was sure I was not going to see another sunrise. I was sure this was the end. About an hour later, I left the safe room because I was in physical pain. I had to go to the bathroom. I hadn't gone to the bathroom all morning, and I wasn't going to do it in front of my son. I opened the door of my safe room very quietly as possible, so that if there was anybody in the house, I would hear. And I saw the window opposite me, the slats had been broken. So that's what we heard earlier on. My son, weeks later, told me that he'd heard a sound that he didn't recognize. It was them breaking through the slats, and then somebody called them away. Hannah Popovel, who was kidnapped, is 2 houses down from me. And my neighbor, I found out in retrospect, was pacing back and forth in his house with his pistol and looking through the window to see if terrorists were coming to his house. And he saw the terrorists walking Hannah and probably Nadav, he didn't recognize Nadav, between my house and my other neighbor's house. So in my brain, I sort of connect them together, that they called the ones that were taking Hannah away, called the ones that were trying to get into my house, and they said, come help us. But that's just in my brain. I don't know. Nobody can say that for sure. At the same time that this was going on, my son-in-law, in the safe room with my grandchildren, they were on the other side of the kibbutz, the side that was infiltrated. And there was a lot of heavy battles going on around there. That's where the first responders tried to come and to kill as many terrorists as they could. My son-in-law heard them entering his house. He heard a lot of voices and breaking things and a lot of noise. And as he heard them coming closer to the safe room, he told my grandchildren, 2, 6, and 8 years old, hide under the blanket. You're going to hear a loud noise. Don't come after me. Don't get out. I'll be here. And he opened the door and shot the terrorist right in front of his door. He tried to kill another 2 that were in his house, but they ran away, and he saw through the door that there were numerous heavily armed terrorists outside, and that he didn't stand the chance. So he closed the door of the safe room, got down on one knee, aimed at the door, and was that way for hours, waiting for somebody to come through. And he said, whoever comes through is getting a bullet. After that happened, they kept shooting at the house, and my granddaughters are very traumatized, very, very traumatized still today.
What do they say or don't say? What do you know about this trauma? Do they speak about it, or how does it manifest itself?
So, I haven't spoken to I've interviewed the entire kibbutz. My family haven't spoken to me about their trauma. It's too hard for them, I guess, and I'm not pushing. You know, I asked them a few times. I said, whenever you're ready, and that was it. They were here for the first month in Edut, and the girls wouldn't leave the hotel. They were sure that terrorists were going to drive by in a car and shoot them outside. They wouldn't leave the hotel. One evening, Alon, my son-in-law, finally convinced them to go out to a restaurant because his sister was here. So they went out to eat. As they're leaving, there was an air raid siren. That finished them off completely. After that, anytime he left the room, they made my daughter go sit with them in the stairwell. At which point, my daughter came to the conclusion that she really needs to get them out of here. So she took them to Ruchama, which is not far from Sderot, but it's a secret. Nobody knows about it. No rockets go there, so it's quiet and green and beautiful and closer to what they're used to at home.
Let's go back to
So we'll go back to October 7th.
Yes,
so that happened around 10 in the morning. And we're sitting there for hours and hours and hours, and all the time there's incoming rockets, and we hear the shooting outside, and we have no idea when anybody is going to come and save us. And we kept getting messages, the army are doing their best, they'll get here as soon as possible, hang on a little bit more. And I'm seeing the frantic messages through the SMS program that we have, saying, they're in our house, they're shooting at our door, come save us, the house is on fire. And we all know where everybody lives, so we're watching the progression of this terror coming nearer, surrounding us. Did you interview Uriel? Okay, so there was a family with a 10-day-old baby whose house was on fire, and it was heartbreaking because nobody could help them. They were just, the place was swarming with terrorists. The first boots on the ground were at 1:30, but just a few weeks ago, we found out the whole story of Asaf Hamami, who came at just before 7.
Who was Asaf Hamami?
Asaf Hamami was the head of the Southern Brigade, and he realized at about 6:15 that something something serious was happening in the communities. He went out with 2 of his soldiers, and he was in Nirim, battling the terrorists before 7. So those were actually the first boots on the ground, but we had no idea that he was there. He was tragically killed by the terrorists. He killed many of their leaders, but in the end they killed him. The leaders that were left wanted to get credit for the death of this clearly influential, important soldier. They took his body and the bodies of the other soldiers that were with him, put him on a car, and drove back to Gaza with them. And this is one of the little miracles, if you can call it that happened that day that saved Nirim from being like Nir Oz. Nir Oz is missing Niroz lost 1 out of every 4 of their people. 1 out of every 4 slaughtered or kidnapped or missing. 1 out of every 4. On Nirim, 5 people were murdered on Nirim, and in fact, together with Hamami and his soldiers, so it was 8. And 5 were kidnapped. They weren't all Nirim people.
What's the population of Nirim?
Nirim is about 450 people. But we were, so there were many people that weren't there because it was vacation. There were many people that were away. But there were many people that were there as visitors, that just like my son was visiting. So one of those who were murdered, 2 of those who were murdered were visitors, and 1 was kidnapped. So the first boots on the ground, serious troops, wasn't till 1:30, 6 hours. 6 hours on our own.
Was that when you were liberated from the safe
No,
room?
no. They came in. They went to the areas that were in most dire need, like Uriel with the baby. They didn't, and they went house to house, clearing, making sure that there were no terrorists in the area, and extricating family by family, house by house. They didn't get to me until about 5:15. So we were almost 11 hours in the safe room, in the house, absolutely certain that this was the end. Because even though we knew that there was army in the kibbutz, we didn't know where they were. We didn't know where the terrorists were. We didn't know that if the terrorists had all been caught. So we still had, and even when they came to extricate us, it was under fire. It was under rocket fire. In fact, again, on Facebook, I was filming our walking. I was doing a live, and all of a sudden you hear a rocket alert. So we had to lie down in the middle of being evacuated. And I couldn't understand why they were taking us the long way round to get to the community center, because they brought everybody to the community center so that they could protect us from all sides. And only afterwards, when I asked, why did you take us the long way round, they explained that they didn't want us to be exposed to the bodies that were on the regular road. So I don't know if it was, as far as I know, it was terrorist bodies, but still they wanted, because there wasn't anybody from my neighborhood who was slaughtered. It was from other neighborhoods where my son-in-law lived.
You mentioned earlier a friend of yours that went running, Judy. Did you find out what happened to her during the day?
Later that afternoon, we were told that they were considered kidnapped. They were missing and then considered kidnapped. A few days, the 10th, a few days later, I was in touch with her children, because she's a close personal friend of mine. I was in touch with her children, and I told them about this picture. I said, do you want me to send you the pictures? They said, well, have a look and see when it was taken. So I went back to the WhatsApp group. Only then, a few days later, did I realize it wasn't a picture. It was a clip. They were a clip that she took. You see the sky, but you hear their voices whispering to each other. You hear the red alert in the background. You hear the gunshots. You hear Judy saying, what's that? What's going on? And a few 5 to 10 minutes after she shot that clip, they were shot. She called the nurse in Niroz and said, Gadi's hit bad. I'm shot in the hand and the face. Come with an ambulance. But of course the ambulance was neutralized by then and nobody could get out of Niroz. And there's even a recording of her for Magen David Adom. You hear her talking like a little bit after that when she realized that the nurse wasn't going to be able to come from the kibbutz. She tried calling the general Magen David Adom, and that's the last they heard of them. So they were considered captive in Gaza. They're the names I put on the back of my dog tag.
Do you know what happened to her since?
About 4 weeks ago, it was announced that Gadi was dead. And a week later, Judy. How they decided, nobody saw them because they were taken separately from the rest of the people from Niroz. They were 2 kilometers away from the kibbutz, walking in the field someplace. There was a forensic doctor on TV that was explaining how they decide witnesses, the seriousness of the wound, the assumption that they didn't get medical care. Somewhere, someplace inside, I'm still hoping that maybe she'll be one of the miracles, one of the mistakes, because there have been mistakes. So I'm still keeping hope. So after we were extricated at 5:30, we were brought to the community center where everybody in the kibbutz was, and there was still a lot of gunfire and a lot of sounds of war outside. We were in the community center. They brought, by 9:30, 9 o'clock, they brought everybody in the kibbutz into this community center, and it was so crowded that you couldn't even stand, let alone sit. So the army got groups of people with children that they took to the different children's houses and the different daycare centers, which are rocket-proof, which are protected, and they had soldiers around them. So they split us up for the night so that people could at least sit or lie down and get some rest. I left my house with just a dress, a summer dress, and my shoes and a bag, and I was freezing. So I found a tablecloth and covered myself with that and tried to sleep on a chair. I slept maybe an hour that night. But it was a long, scary, tense night. And the next day at 1 o'clock, we were told that they believed they'd gotten all of the terrorists that were in our kibbutz. There were still terrorists around the kibbutz, but inside, as far as they knew, it was clear. And that we should go back to our homes, quickly pack a bag, and wait in the safe room until they gave us word that we were being evacuated to buses. And there were 4 different buses spread around the kibbutz. It was not organized well, because nobody knew who was going on what bus. So when word came at 3 to get on the buses, I'm like, okay, here I am going on the bus. But in the end, I was sitting on that bus for 40 minutes. If there had been an incoming rocket alert in that time, people wouldn't have been able to get to someplace safe. So that in itself was a petrifying period of time. We finally left the kibbutz at 3, drove through an active war zone. There were burning cars on the side, charred bodies on the ground, tanks driving next to the roads, and fear of terrorists attacking the bus. We finally got to Beersheba on we finally got to Eilat, to where we are till today, on October 8th, 8 o'clock in the evening about. I'm not a religious person, not an observant person. For the first time in my life, I Googled Birkat Gomel, the prayer to give thanks of having escaped a death, possibly fatal incident, and I said Birkat Gomel for the first time in my life.
Have you been to Kibbutz Nirim since?
Sorry?
Have you been to Nirim since?
I have. I've been back 4 times to take people around. I went the first time with the BBC. I wanted to go anyway and get my car because I left my car there. I was too frightened to drive on my own in the car down to Eilat. But a few weeks in, I wanted my car. Many of the cars were burnt, destroyed. After the terrorists, there was a wave of shababim, a wave of looters and plunderers who came to the kibbutz and caused a lot of damage and burnt cars and destroyed property. And I don't know who set light to the house, if it was the looters or the terrorists. But anyway, my car was still in one piece as far as I knew. So I figured, why leave a car that's working in a war zone? So I was going to go up anyway to get my car and to get some things. And the BBC, who had interviewed me in the past, contacted me and asked if they could interview me. And I said, well, Tuesday I'm going to Nirim if you want to come. So they accompanied me to Nirim. They were very helpful. Helped me empty out the refrigerator, throw out all the food, wash the car so I could see through it. They were great. No complaints against the BBC, at least that team. But I've been back altogether 4 times. And 2 weeks ago, I went back. I was going to sleep there. In the end, I didn't because I wanted to see my daughter and grandchildren because I didn't know when I was going to get to see them. But I went back to take a group of female rabbis around. So I've been on Nirim a few times, each time in order to show people and tell our story because the world has to know.
Were you surprised by this attack?
Was I surprised with what?
This attack. Did it surprise you? Was it a surprise for you?
What
happened
a surprise?
On the 7th, the attack?
October 7th?
Yes. Did you see it coming?
If you go into my Facebook group and look up September 12th, you'll see a post that I put there with reports that I'd gotten of Hamas practicing in a sample kibbutz in Gaza to kidnap kibbutzniks, to kidnap civilians. So was it a surprise? No. But I couldn't have, first of all, I didn't think that they would succeed. I wasn't surprised that they tried. I didn't think they would succeed. It was a shock that the army just wasn't there. And the level of the barbarity of the attacks, of that totally shocked me. Totally shocked.
Has it changed your view about anything? Meaning politics, or what do you think about our neighbors on the other side of the border? What does this mean?
So I used to give tours of Nirim, telling our story many, many, many times. Every time I would tell them that I'm positive that the great majority of the people who live on the other side of that fence just want the same thing that I do, to put food on their table, have safety for their children, and to be able to get on with life. On October 7th, something in my DNA switched. And I still believe that there are people like that there, because I am in touch with people like that, and I do believe them. Tragically, far fewer than I thought. And what I realized that the Hamas, it's all about education. And the Hamas have been doing an excellent job, an stellar, outstanding job of teaching a whole generation to hate us. The clips that we've seen of children in a kindergarten getting dressed up as IDF soldiers and Gazan fighters, and the Gazan fighters taking them hostage and killing them, those are the monsters that were in my house on October 7th.
So you have friends, Palestinian friends. Were you in touch with them after the 7th of October? Did they try to send you something?
On the 7th of October, at 5 to 8 in the morning, I got a WhatsApp from someone I was in contact with. And she said, "What's happening?" And I said, I don't know what's happening by you. I can show you the interaction. I wrote a blog post about it on Times of Israel as well, with screenshots. And at one point she wrote, "I'm just outside your house." I'm like, what? And so I wrote, "What?" and she said, I'm in Abasan." So there was linguistic fallout here. She's not a native English speaker. She's not a very good English speaker. So she said, "I'm just outside your house," meaning I'm just on the other side of the fence in my town opposite in Abazan Kabir. But the whole situation that happened on October 7th caused me, I don't know who to trust on the other side. So there's a man that I've been in touch with for years, Rami Aman, who founded the Gaza Youth Committee. And I do believe that we did educational activities together. We did a marathon in 2019 where young people on our side and young people on his side rode on bicycles on the same day with the same shirt that said "Freedom, Peace." And when the Hamas got wind of it, they put him in jail and tortured him. And when he got out 3 months later, he picked up the phone and he said, "Adele, I'm out and we're continuing." So I know that he's dedicated. He's no longer there. He escaped to Egypt. But he's very angry at me now because of another situation that happened. Bati Holin from Kfar Aza did a photo exhibition, pictures on her side of the fence, and she wanted to find a Gazan who would take pictures from the Gazan side of the fence. And I helped her find that person with Rami. So we helped find a photographer from Gaza. They did a wonderful exhibition. Of course, the Gazan never got to be here, but it got very good response, and they were supposed to go to San Diego, and on October 7th, she also was contacted by him. From what she understands, the photographer, that Gazan, was trying to get information about how many soldiers and where there were, and she's convinced that he was a Hamas operative, and she took it to the press, and it made a lot of noise, and Rami is furious with me. He said, "This woman is a liar. How could you put me in touch with a woman who's a liar?" And I said, "She's not a liar. I believe you, but I also believe her." And I spoke to somebody else who also knows that photographer and somebody else who I trust. And she said, "There's no way." So whether Batia misunderstood or the photographer's phone was taken and these messages were sent because somebody knew that he did this, I don't know. But Rami won't talk to me now. He's really angry at me, and there was this bridge. Bridges of trust were built, but they weren't steel bridges. They were bridges of cards that, after October 7th, have just dissipated and fallen down. And I honestly do not know who to trust. And I've definitely politically moved. And the thoughts in my mind these days, the Hamas have important cards in their hands. 136 hostages. Why are we letting anything, any humanitarian aid, get into Gaza? Why don't we use these cards against them? I don't get it, because otherwise there's no way we're going to get those people back. The IDF are not going to get them, and Hamas are not going to let them go. And for me to be saying something like that, keep humanitarian aid out, that's like, I would never, ever have even thought that. But now I'm thinking that. These 136 people who've been there 104 days.
You change this every day?
I change it every day. The mother of one of the hostages, Rachel Goldberg, her son,
Hirsch.
she changes it every day. And I saw a few days ago, I saw her, I'd seen her doing it, and I saw her doing a TikTok or Instagram saying, it pains me that I'm the only one that's doing that. Just masking tape and a pen. It's easy. Help me carry this burden. Even if you take a gram of it off of me, I will feel relief. So I'm doing it. And I made an effort to get it to her. I hope the picture gets to her. So she knows I'm doing it too, and there are other people that are doing it too. But these 136 people, not all alive, they're keeping bodies there. Judy and Gadi are among the 136. So they've got 136 Israelis, live and dead, for 104 days. We have to get them back. We have Yegev and Nadav.
From the kibbutz.
From our kibbutz. 104 days. We have to get them back.
Amidst all this darkness, can you see a light? Can you see something positive to say that has happened because of the 7th, after the 7th?
Somewhere around June or July, I started thinking I had a problem with the whole political situation. I didn't go all out with the protests because I felt they were too divisive. And I felt it was dangerous. And I knew that our enemies are watching. And I said to myself, something bad's going to have to happen for us to be able to fix this. I didn't imagine how bad. But since October 7th, the country has come together. And we've seen the Eretz Yisrael Yafa. We've seen the beautiful Israel. We've seen the Israel that I made Aliyah to. We've seen the Israel that I'm proud of and can proudly state that I am a citizen of Israel. I'm a Zionist because of this, because of the way the people are coming together now. And I hope we have really long memories.
Will you go back to Nirim?
Yeah. For sure, we have to. If you give up on Nirim, if you give up on Eshkol, give up on the country. Where does it end? You move the border, it gets to Tel Aviv. Where does it end? And where is it safe? Somebody was killed in Ra'anana yesterday or 2 days ago, right? Terror gets at every place. You know, you can move to Beersheba, but they get rockets. Ashkelon gets rockets. Ashdod. Up north, where is it safe? Jerusalem has had knifings and rammings. Tel Aviv has had buses blowing up. Where is it safe? So I'm going back for sure. The government has a lot of work to do. The army has a lot of work to do to give me back the sense of security that I had
but they know you
on
go
October
back
6th.
Anyway.
Sorry?
But they know you will go back anyway.
I won't go back until I feel safe, and certainly families are not going to move there until we feel safe. It's not enough for a 69-year-old grandmother to go back there. You need families, you need children to be living there. I have to get my sense of security back and know that it is not just a sense, that it is a true security, a true solid security. That they're not going to be relying only on technology, which can be taken out in a nanosecond and you've got nothing. You're completely helpless. But the IDF have learned that. I have no doubt that when this is finished, many conclusions will have to be drawn, and I'm sure that many people will be putting keys on the table. And we have to rebuild all over. We have to rebuild the army. We have to rebuild the politics. We have to rebuild our community bigger and better than it was before so that people are going to want to come back and live with us.